I destroyed everyone who loved me. My wife, my sister, even my dog. Then I woke up on the exact night that ruined my life. This time
I knew exactly who was coming to rob me tonight. Their names, their faces, the exact time they would arrive. I knew because I had already lived through this night once. And the last time, it cost me everything. 10 years of debt, a marriage destroyed, a son who grew up hungry, a dog I loved, butchered and eaten while I sat next door doing nothing, all because of what was about to happen in the next 30 minutes. December 20th, 1992, 30 degrees below zero. I was buried inside my own woodpile with my father's hunting rifle across my lap, the barrel aimed at the granary across the yard. My overcoat was stiff with frost. My beard had gone white. My eyelashes had gone white. My fingers had stopped hurting about an hour ago, which meant they were past cold and into something worse. Nobody sane would be outside in this, but I had been waiting 2 hours, and I was not leaving until those two men walked into my granary and put their hands on my equipment. The granary was stuffed with machinery I had bought on a loan shark's money, 40% interest. In the life I already lived, this equipment got stolen on this exact night, and I spent a decade drowning. My wife suffered, my son grew up poor. I blamed a parts dealer named Leong, cursed that man for 10 years, when the truth was, he had hidden 400 wen inside the equipment as a kindness, and I never found it. December 20th was burned into my skull, the way certain dates are. The night everything broke. The night I lost 10 years before they even started. Dubai pressed against my legs. That big white dog had been lying there the whole time, not moving, not whining, just pushing his warmth into me like he understood what we were doing out here. In my other life, the Gao brothers stole him. By the time I found out, he was a pot of dog meat, and his newborn puppies had frozen to death in the yard. I heard his barking that night. I just did not care enough to check. This time, he was warm against my shins. This time, I cared. So I sat, and I waited, and I did not move. Headlights cut through the fence. The beam swept across the yard and went dark. An agricultural tricycle rolled to a stop outside the granary, engine off, and two figures climbed out. The tall one lifted the plastic sheeting and flipped over into the granary. The shorter one followed. That tricycle belonged to someone in the village. I knew those men. The tall one was Gao Jun. The shorter one was Gao Chang, brothers. We grew up together. When they passed me on the road, they smiled and called me Brother Dawa. I smiled back. None of us meant any of it. My heart was slamming. I watched them carry a brand new diesel generator out of the granary and load it into the tricycle. They checked the darkness. Then they went back inside. They came out with the air compressor, 500 jin of cast iron and motor, the two of them grunting, struggling to lift it onto the tricycle bed. That was what I was waiting for. A generator, a man could explain away, but you do not accidentally carry a 500 jin compressor out of someone's granary at 8 in the evening in 30 below weather. I fired 2 shots. The sound cracked the frozen air open. Every dog in the village started barking. I was already out of the woodpile and running. Dabai, get them! That dog hit Gao Jun's thigh and clamped down. The tall man howled and dropped to the snow. I swung the rifle butt into Gao Chang's jaw. He went down and stayed down. Then I was on top of Gao Jun, my fists, his face, over and over. 10 years of debt. 10 years of my wife eating scraps while I chased money in a city that did not want me. 10 years of blaming a parts dealer named Liang, who had actually hidden 400 won in my equipment as a kindness, and I never found it, and I cursed him my entire life. All because of these 2 grinning neighbors who called me Brother Dawa and robbed me in the dark. Every punch carried a decade, but I did not kill them. My wife was inside that collapsing house with my firstborn son in her belly, and a man in prison is not a father. My son needed me alive and free, more than I needed these 2 dead. The rage left as fast as it came. My knuckles were split. Gao Jun was whimpering in the snow, blood on his teeth. Gao Chang had not moved since the rifle butt. Doors were opening all over the village. Neighbors poured out in cotton coats, gathering in front of my father's yard like an audience that had been waiting for the show. A few outsiders spoke up. What is going on? Stop hitting him. You will kill him. The same clan families said nothing. They watched. Then, old Gao woman arrived. She was short, maybe 1.50 m, and she came running with her hair loose and her voice louder than the gunshots. She threw herself down next to her sons, slapping the snow, wailing that I had killed them, screaming for my father to come out and answer for what his son had done. Every gesture was calculated for the crowd. Her boys were thieves caught red-handed, and she was trying to flip it into a murder scene. Nobody moved to help her. Nobody moved to stop her. Then, my father's voice. What is going on? Calm, not loud. The entire yard went silent. Old Gao woman, mid-wail, shut her mouth. He stepped through the crowd, thin, wrinkled, cotton coat, dogskin hat, that permanent frown. He looked like any old man from any village in the Northeast, except no one in that crowd would dream of crossing him. Yu Lao Nian had been the richest man in this village for half his life. He earned that silence with decades, not threats. He walked to me and put his hand on my shoulder. Say what you need to say. Tell the truth. That face, that frown, that dogskin hat, those thin shoulders under the cotton coat. In my other life, I lost this man. I was not there when it mattered. I wasted every chance he gave me and called it his fault. And now, here he was, alive, frowning at me, his hand on my shoulder. The tears came before I could stop them. They froze on my cheeks almost immediately, tiny lines of ice, and I could not wipe them because my hands were shaking. My father noticed. I could see the question forming behind his eyes. His eldest son bled but never cried. Not in front of the village, never in public. He did not ask. He squeezed my shoulder once and waited. I choked it back and told him what happened. Old Gao woman tried again. She clutched her moaning son and wailed about how the Gao family had been cattle and horses for the Yu family for generations, how we were heartless, how times were supposed to be equal now. Ancient history twisted into a weapon. My father did not argue. He looked at me and said 4 words. Call the police. No mercy. Then he told old Gao woman in that same flat voice that times had indeed changed, that right and wrong were for the law to decide now, not for ordinary people. She went quiet, not because she agreed, because there was nothing left to say to a man like that. 2 police jeeps arrived within the hour. They assessed the equipment, noted the value, and took both Gao brothers away in handcuffs. Gao Jun wet himself in the back of the jeep. Old Gao woman fainted in the snow and had to be carried home by relatives. The young officer in charge, Hao Jiangqiang, confiscated the rifle and gave me a demerit instead of detention. He told me quietly that a senior official from the city was inspecting the region. The value pushed it past petty theft. The brothers would not be coming back for a very long time. Before he left, he told me to come to town sometime. He would buy me a drink. My father stood in the snow and watched the taillights vanish down the road. Then he turned, walked to the granary without a word, and started pulling the equipment back inside. I followed. Together, in silence, we moved iron, the 500 gin compressor, the generator, piece by piece, in the freezing dark, the moon high and white above the village. He did not say he was proud of me. He did not say it was about time. He just walked beside me, his thin arms straining against the weight, and that was enough. The next morning, I loaded the equipment onto my father's Dongfanghong tractor and drove to town alone. No canopy, -30. The road was a frozen track between snowdrifts, and every pothole sent the steering column into my ribs. But the sky was that deep northeast blue you only get after heavy snow, and I kept my eyes on it whenever the road let me. First stop, the loan shark. Paid in full, 40% interest, settled. He counted the money twice, shrugged, and waved me out. The debt that ate 10 years of my first life vanished in under a minute. Second stop, the Hongwei machinery parts store. Boss Liang was behind his counter. A man so round his belly arrived before his handshake. I reached into my coat and set 400 yuan on the counter. He stared at it, then at me. I told him I found the money hidden inside the cylinder liner, 400 and some yuan, tucked away where no buyer would think to look. In my other life, I never found it. I carried that equipment home, got robbed, drowned in debt, and spent 10 years cursing this man's name. The truth was simpler. He had hidden his own private savings inside the equipment as a safety net, a quiet act of kindness from a man who had watched too many young buyers get destroyed by loan sharks, and I cursed him for a decade. His face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, then something I had not earned, gratitude. He told me the money was savings hidden from his wife. He had already written it off as gone. "You are a truly reliable person," he said, and he meant it in a way that had nothing to do with 400 yuan. I returned the equipment too. 3-day return policy, no problem. He tossed me a pair of cotton gloves, asked my father's name, and nodded. Same township. He told me to call him Brother Liang from now on, and if I ever needed parts, I could buy on credit. 400 yuan. That was what it cost to undo a lifetime of wrong. After settling up, I had 2,880 yuan left. Every cent of it was my wife's dowry money. I drove north to the scrap recycling station on the edge of Luha town. That was when I saw the flatbed truck pulling in with the orange Hitachi on its back. Half the body was crusted in dried cement. The main boom hydraulic cylinder leaked in a slow drip. No windows, no doors, no cab roof. Dead grass growing out of the engine bay. It looked like a machine that had crawled into a cement pond to die and almost made it. My heart started beating the way it had in the woodpile. Boss Duan, the station owner, ushered everyone into his brick shack. The man who brought the Hitachi was named Wang Shuo, fat, shivering in a 400 wan leather jacket that did nothing for him. His excavator operator had driven the UH-03 into a cement pit on purpose after Wang Shuo refused to pay wages. By the time Wang Shuo returned from a trip, the cement had dried solid. Engine, hydraulics, everything. Paste. Duan Dahai did not want it. Even as scrap, you would have to chisel the cement off first. I sat by the stove and said nothing for a long time. Everyone in that room saw a 7,000-pound pile of frozen cement and rust. I saw a Hitachi UH-03, the first hydraulic excavator independently developed by Japan, late 60s. In my other life, I repaired one exactly like it. The UH-03 was Hitachi's most overbuilt machine, thick steel, bulletproof frame. The only chronic issue was oil leaks, and oil leaks were what I did for a living. Wang Shuo asked 5,000. I offered 2,500. Duan Dahai helped talk him down. We wrote the agreement on the back of his son's homework paper, 3 signatures. I paid 200 more for a crane to lift it off the flatbed. That left me just over 100 yuan in my pocket. Over lunch at a small restaurant, Duan Dahai told me I could leave the excavator at his station through the winter. He held up 2 fingers and said if I got the cement off by spring, it was worth at least 8,000. He was thinking too small. In 2 months, a highway was starting north of town. Excavator hire rates would be 500 a day, but that number stayed behind my teeth. By the time I got home, the sky was dark. Candle glow leaked through our window. Her shadow sat on the edge of the heated brick bed, the same place she always sat. I pulled off my coat and took out a yellowed, thread-bound copy of Journey to the West. Used, worn. The pages smelled like dust and old glue. I set it on the edge of the bed. Han Jingfan looked at the book, then at me, then at the book again. In our entire marriage, I had never brought her anything. In my other life, I found out years too late that she loved books. Her father showed me a storeroom with 4 full boxes. She had earned the money for every one of them, hauling water and chopping wood for an old woman in the village. Then the neighbors gossiped, and she stopped reading, sealed the boxes shut, and her mind went dark with them. When I found those boxes, my son was 4. Her father asked what to do with them. I sold every last book in front of her face while she begged me to stop, and I used the money to buy gifts for her in-laws. This book cost me almost nothing, a few coins, but it was the first thing I had ever given her that said, "I see you." "Thank you," she said. 2 words. She held the book with both hands, the way you hold something that might disappear. Her right hand drifted to her belly. I turned to the stove, added corn cobs, pressed split wood onto the fire. "I returned the equipment," I said. "The money was from a loan shark. It is paid back. The house money we borrowed from your father, I will pay that back too." Then I asked her something I had never asked in 22 years of marriage. "Little fan, do you have any thoughts about our future?" The fire crackled. Wind pushed against the window. She stared at me. Then she said she wanted to see a big city someday. She wanted to write something, if they ever had enough to eat. But she figured she would stay in the village, farm the land, raise 2 pigs. 1 male, 1 female, I said. She smiled. Chickens, ducks, geese. Fix the yard. Build a brick house when we had money. A dog house for Dubai, because he had been with us 2 years and still slept in a hay shelter. I told her about the excavator, that the money came from her dowry, that the machine was old, buried in cement, sitting at a recycling station, that I could fix it, that if all else failed, 15 tons of scrap steel was worth more than I paid. She set Journey to the West down on the bedding and looked up at me. "Did you buy a hydraulic excavator or a mechanical one?" I stared at her. "Hitachi?" she said. My wife, the woman I had dismissed as a rural girl who knew nothing, had read a construction machinery textbook years before I ever touched an engine. She bought it from a truck driver for 21. She already knew what a UH-03 was. I stood by the stove with the poker in my hand, fire popping behind me, and I understood something that took an entire lifetime to learn the first time around. She was never the one who knew nothing. That was always me. The next morning, my mother was up at 4, rolling dough by candlelight. Pickled cabbage filling, my favorite. Yu Feng came out next, washed her face, and started wrapping dumplings without being asked. 18 years old and already running the kitchen like she had been doing it for decades. After the dumplings, I walked to my parents' house to grab tools. The dish rack still had sugar triangles on the bottom shelf. I reached for 2, biting into one and holding the other. Yu Feng sat on the edge of the heated brick bed with her legs tucked under her. Yu Yan leaned against her shoulder. My 2 sisters watched me eat, with that look younger siblings give you when they want to say something, but have not decided what. "Big brother, you seem to have changed," Yu Feng said. Her large eyes studied me the way my father's did. "Careful, measuring, missing nothing. Have I? Am I becoming more handsome? I grinned at them both, the sugar triangle half gone. Yu Yan giggled and leaned closer. She told me I was not becoming more handsome. I was becoming more shameless. Yufeng smiled but said nothing. Then her right hand drifted to her temple. She pressed it with 2 fingers, a small circular motion, and looked away. Headache again? I asked. She waved it off, the same way she always waved it off. Just a headache, comes and goes. She had been having them since childhood, and nobody in this village had ever thought to ask why an 18-year-old girl pressed her fingers to her skull 3 times a day. I knew why. In my other life, those headaches were a tumor, small, operable. A good surgeon could have cut it out with a success rate that would make you angry it was never caught. But nobody had the money. The nearest hospital capable of a craniotomy cost more than our family earned in a year. Yufeng married a man from the village, got pregnant, and died not long after giving birth. She was the smartest of the 5 of us, shrewd, methodical, self-taught from my father's book chest. He secretly consulted her on family decisions. She could have been anything. She became a grave marker on a hillside before she turned 30. I stood there with half a sugar triangle in my hand and said nothing. Not because I did not care, because caring without resources is just grief with extra steps. I needed money, connections, a doctor who could look inside my sister's head and find the thing killing her. Right now, I had 100 wen in my pocket and a pile of frozen cement in a scrapyard. Yufeng caught me staring. What? She said. Nothing. Eat a dumpling. She laughed. The sound was bright, easy, completely unaware of the clock ticking behind it. Every time she laughed from that morning on, I heard 2 things. My sister being happy and the years I had left to save her. The village bus arrived around 6. I loaded my father's toolbox onto the back, military green, made from old shell casings, over 100 gin of wrenches and socket sets, and 2 custom pry bars. My mother cornered me behind the bus and stuffed crumpled bills into my pocket, her own private money. I tried to give it back. She pressed my hand down. Han Jingfan stood a few meters away, shy, waiting. I'm leaving, I said. She nodded. Then she straightened her back and said, wishing the boss a smooth journey and to make big money every day. I laughed. Where did you learn that? From a book. She tilted her head. I also have 99 New Year greetings. Do you want to hear them? No, that sentence is perfect. I touched her head gently. I'm off. Through the rear window, I could see my family standing in front of the courtyard gate, my father's thin silhouette, my mother's crescent moon eyes, Yufeng's hand drifting back to her temple. Duan Dahai's recycling station looked exactly the way I left it. Brick shack, plastic sheeting windows, and a 15-ton pile of orange cement in the northeast corner like a dare. I handed him 3 caddies of my mother's bean buns at the gate. His face lit up like I had given him gold. Every instinct in my body said go to the Hitachi, start chipping. April is closer than you think. Instead, I set down my toolbox and asked Duan Dahai what needed sorting. He looked at me like I had lost my mind. In my first life, I rushed everything, took favors without earning them, used people's yards without building the relationship first, burned through allies faster than I burned through money. When the company collapsed, I had no one left to call, not because they were bad people, because I never gave them a reason to stay. This time, I spent the entire afternoon sorting scrap with Duan Dahai, broken pots, tangled wire, beer bottles, steel rods. The Hitachi sat 40 meters away, untouched, and I did not look at it once. By late afternoon, I had a different project. I dragged a massive oil drum out of the junk pile, taller than I was, and rolled it across the yard. I cut a round opening in the lid with the station's cutting machine, inserted a broken furnace tube from the scrap heap, welded steel bars into a grate inside, and cut another opening on the side for airflow. 2 hours, start to finish. A stove, big enough to heat a shed in -40 weather. I had built them before, in colder places, during a past life fixing machines in Hohhot. The trick was the grate height and the draft. Get those right, and an oil drum burns coal like a real furnace. Duan Dahai walked around it twice, nodding. He told me to grab coal from the pile in the yard. His hometown connection sold it for 50 yuan a ton. Burn as much as you need. That evening, I cooked. Stewed pickled cabbage, clear broth, with the bean buns steamed on top. The skill was a lifetime of cooking out of necessity, not talent. When you are poor long enough, you learn to make cabbage taste like a feast. Duan Dahai came in from the cold, took off his dogskin hat, and the smell hit him. He took one bite and gave me a thumbs up without speaking. Then he ate like a man who had forgotten what a real meal tasted like. After dinner, we spread our bedding on the heated brick bed and talked in the dark. He told me about his son in junior high, who lived at the town dormitory and never visited. The boy was ashamed of having a father who collected junk. Duan Dahai stared at the ceiling and said someday he wanted to be a real boss, the kind everyone envied. Then he laughed at himself, softly, the way men laugh when they do not believe their own dreams. I told him he was only in his 40s. He had time. He went quiet, listening to the fire crackle in the stove I had built from his own trash. Tomorrow, I would start on the cement. Every swing of the sledgehammer would carry the weight of what I knew was coming: the highway, the contract, my sister's headaches getting worse while I chipped concrete off a dead machine in a junkyard. But tonight, I had done the thing my old self never learned to do: built the foundation before the house, sorted another man's garbage, cooked another man's dinner, earned the right to ask for help by offering it first. Nobody would tell stories about the day Yudawei sorted trash, but the man sleeping 3 feet from me on that brick bed would remember it. And when it mattered, Duan Dahai would not hesitate. That was worth more than a head start on the cement. The cement came off in layers: hot water first, then the sledgehammer while the surface was still steaming. My palms split and healed and split again, but every chunk that fell revealed more orange steel underneath, and each piece of orange was proof the frame had survived. By the third day, I had cleared the lower tracks and most of the boom housing. The rhythm settled: cement in the morning, sorting scrap with Duan in the afternoon, cooking for both of us at night. Late one afternoon, just as the last daylight was bleeding orange across the yard, an old man rode in on a tricycle loaded with 3 sacks. Behind him, pushing through the frozen ruts, was a man in a down jacket and a dogskin hat. Uncle Lee, the old collector who had helped Duan build his customer base years ago. He parked, wandered under the plastic sheeting, and stuck a stick into my oil drum stove to light his pipe. The man behind him stepped in after. Duan Dahai recognized him and corrected himself mid-sentence. Not Officer Hao anymore. Deputy Director Hao. The thief case in our village had earned Hao Zhangqiang a promotion. Hao waved it off. All for show, he said. Then he looked at me and smiled. We had not seen each other since the night he confiscated my father's rifle. After Uncle Lee rode off humming, I squatted in the sorting area, picking through his sack of books. Most were ruined school notebooks. 2 survived: a livestock handbook and how the steel was tempered. Hao Zhangqiang asked what I was doing on the ground. Checking for books, I said. My wife likes to read. Duan Dahai grinned and started charging 5 yuan per book. I told him he could not take my money even if I threw it at him. He said he absolutely could. I said I had none. Hao cut in before the bit could go any further. He had stopped smiling. Dawei, I have a classmate in infrastructure. He needs excavators. He is buying me dinner tonight. Come with me. Duan Dahai slapped my shoulder and told me to stop standing there like a post. He turned down his own invitation, heated up leftovers on the small stove instead. Duan could read a room better than most men who went to school for it. He knew this meal was not about eating. On the walk into town, Hao told me the real reason. He admired how I treated my wife, the books, the way I spoke about her. In 1992, in the rural Northeast, wives did not sit at the table when guests came. They ate leftovers after the men were done. A husband who bought his wife books was the kind of thing men joked about in public and quietly respected behind closed doors. Noteworthy enough to earn a dinner invitation, the restaurant was called Silly Big Plate. 2 stories, signboard with 3 characters, platters the size of wash basins. Northeast dining, fill the table, fill the stomach. Hal led me to a private room upstairs. A man in his 30s sat leaning back, cigarette hanging from his mouth, tea in his left hand. Black woolen overcoat, restless energy. He complained that Hao was late, then noticed me. Something flickered across his face. Familiarity he could not place. I could place it fine. Hu Wanqiang. In my other life, I worked for this man years later as a nobody with a temper and no reputation. He took 18 brothers from his village to a construction site, became a contractor within 3 years, and eventually secured the largest development rights in the oil city, one of the richest men in the region. He never gave me an important position. He was right not to. Now we sat across from each other at Silly Big Plate, and he did not know my name yet. Hao introduced me. The young man from Yujiatun who caught the thief has an excavator at Duan Station. The moment I said second uncle, Hu Wanqiang shot to his feet. The connection was through my aunt, my father's brother's wife, Hu Wanqiang's cousin. When his family was poor, she carried grain to their house. I once hauled 50 kilograms of rice to the Ho family on my back as a kid. That kind of debt thickens with time. He slapped his forehead, said he knew I looked familiar, and fired off questions without pausing for answers. Officer Hao stood aside, surprised. He had no idea we were related. Food arrived. Doors closed. Hu Wangqiang dropped his voice. He had a project, the North-South Expressway through Luha Town. That day, he had lunched with the project manager from China Construction 8th Bureau, plus town leaders. The date was confirmed. Construction beginning after the Lunar New Year, March at the earliest, early April by the Gregorian calendar. Dawei, he said. Get that excavator fixed before April. I will take you directly to the project manager. Easy work, good money. Then he leaned forward and gave me something more valuable than the offer: advice. Construction sites are full of men risking their lives for money. Minds are not pure when cash is involved. Because I was young, the chances of someone targeting me were high. Keep a low profile. Best if nobody even knew I owned an excavator. In my other life, I learned that lesson through brick kilns and oilfield brawls. Hu Wangqiang was trying to spare me those years in a single conversation. The glass was already in my hand. I stood and toasted them both. My family worked in vehicle repair. If that ever comes in handy, I will do my best. 3 glasses clinked in a warm room above a dark town. We drank until the streetlights would have come on, if the town had streetlights. Hu Wangqiang talked about chasing a girl. Officer Hao talked about the one who got away, a classmate, pretty, dimples when she smiled, one deep and one shallow. She got engaged while he was at junior college. By the time he came home, she was about to give birth. He kept drinking after that. My face was red. My whole body was red. I have never been able to hold liquor, but listening does not require a steady hand, and I had 30 years of practice. After 8, I drove them both home in Ho Wangqiang's car and walked back to the station alone. Pitch black between passing headlights. A dinner at Silly Big Plate. A family connection I had forgotten existed. A railway project in 3 months. And a conditional promise. Fix the Hitachi by April, and there was a place for me. 3 months. The cement was half gone. The hydraulics had not been touched. The engine was still buried. April was not a deadline. It was a dare. One afternoon in early January, a commotion erupted near the station entrance. A group of men had surrounded 2 others, and the shouting carried across the frozen yard like gunfire. Duan Dahai recognized the taller of the 2 trapped men, Zhang Mazi, local mechanic. Had skills, he said, but was shady, the kind who overcharged for half-finished work and blamed the machine when things went wrong. The man doing the shouting was built like a furnace. Shu Tianzhu from out of town. He had hired Zhang Mazi to fix his Komatsu 850 excavator, the machine his livelihood depended on, dead for over a month. Zhang had taken his money, poked around for weeks, and declared it unfixable. Now he was trying to walk away. Shu Tianzhu blocked his path, 4 men flanking him. He told Zhang he remembered how many people were in his family and what they all looked like. Zhang went pale. He pulled out a wad of cash and offered a refund, admitting his skills were not up to the job. Then he straightened and delivered the line that changed everything. He claimed he was the only mechanic in all of Lu Town who could touch imported excavators. If he could not fix it, nobody could. Shu Tianzhu told his men to take Zhang down. The beating started fast. Duan grabbed my sleeve. This kind of thing happened all the time. Best to stay out of it. I pulled free. Wait a minute, brother Duan. This is money from heaven. Walking toward that crowd was not bravery. It was certainty. In my other life, a construction company flew me to Ethiopia to fix a Komatsu 850 that had sat dead for 2.5 years. Their mechanics had given up. I fixed it in 10 minutes. Stayed 3 days so the company would not feel cheated paying 20,000 yuan for a 10-minute job. The problem was always the same. The distributor's overflow valve gasket, a small rubber seal that hardened and cracked over time, especially on modified machines with mismatched aftermarket parts. When it failed, hydraulic pressure dropped. The boom went limp. The tracks locked. Every mechanic trained on domestic equipment would tear into the engine. On a Komatsu 850, the problem was a gasket the size of a coin. Stop fighting, I said. Shu Tianzhu turned, murder in his eyes. I walked past him to the excavator, studied the boom, then turned back. I can fix this machine, he laughed, told me I had not even grown my hair yet, asked if I even knew the brand. Komatsu 850, I said. I walked to the back, wiped dried paint off the chassis plate, modified frame, boom, cab, tracks all swapped, but the major components are untouched because replacement parts are not available in China right now. The yard went quiet. Zhang Mazi stared at me, blood on his mouth. Even he did not know the specific model. He had been working on this machine for a month without knowing what it was. Give me 1 night, I said. Come back tomorrow at this time, 1,000 yuan. If it does not move, you do not pay a cent. Zhang told the crowd I was a fraud, a kid from a garbage dump. The onlookers agreed, too young, obviously bluffing. Duan Dahai pulled me aside and whispered that Zhang was well known in town. If I failed, the man would make my life impossible. He offered money from his own pocket to cover the apology. Do not worry, brother Duan. I know what I am doing. Shu Tianzhu studied me for a long time. Then he nodded and left. Zhang Mazi lingered long enough to tell me I was too cocky for a kid, then walked away with his apprentice. That was fine. I wanted everyone to walk away. After dinner, I spent 3 hours sitting with Duan by the oil drum stove, talking about nothing. His son, scrap prices, whether spring would come early. The Komatsu sat outside, untouched. Duan thought I was stalling. The truth was simpler. I was waiting. Zhang Mazi and his apprentice were hiding behind a row of parked excavators, watching. I knew they were there the way I knew failing gaskets. Jealousy is the most dangerous force in a small community. If Zhang saw me replace a single gasket in 10 minutes, he would either steal the technique or tamper with the repair after I left. Not out of logic, out of shame. So I sat by the stove and let the cold do my work. Past 1 in the morning, -40, their footsteps crunched away down the frozen road. Then I moved. Military overcoat, cotton gloves, toolbox at the gate. Under the seat of my own Hitachi, I found the small iron box I had spotted days earlier. Gaskets, copper, asbestos, rubber, every hardness. The previous owner had stashed them like emergency currency. 2 wrenches, number 32, number 24. I climbed onto the Komatsu, found the distributor, shone my flashlight until the overflow valve appeared. The old gasket crumbled in my fingers like burnt paper. Aftermarket distributor, wrong gasket spec. It hardened, it cracked, the machine died. Zhang spent a month tearing into the engine because that was where a tractor mechanic would look. He never checked the distributor. New gasket, reassembly, tightened to spec, 10 minutes. I left the Komatsu looking exactly as it had before and went inside. The next day, I chipped cement as if nothing had happened. Zhang came by 3 times, mocked the Hitachi, kicked its treads, told me the Komatsu proved I was a fraud. I kept swinging the sledgehammer. Late afternoon, Xu Tianzhu arrived with his crew and a tow truck, dark-faced. He had heard I never touched the machine. He called me a swindler. Zhang Mazi stood at the edge of the crowd, grinning, announced he had been watching since the previous night. The kid never touched it, not once. Duan Dahai tried to smooth things over, offering his own money for an apology. My chest tightened. This man who collected trash for a living was willing to pay my debt. The car is fixed, I said. I set the sledgehammer down and wiped the sweat from my face. Nobody believed me. Xu Tianzhu's men closed in. Send a driver to test it. If it does not move, I will pay whatever you ask. Xu Tianzhu climbed into the cab. The crowd backed against the wall. The engine turned over. The Komatsu shuddered once, a deep metallic tremor that ran through the frozen ground. Then the boom rose, smooth, strong, hydraulic pressure so clean the arm moved like new. Forward, backward, tracks spinning. The bucket swung against the gray sky. Every face at the wall went slack. Zhang Mazi's apprentice grabbed his master's arm. Zhang said nothing. His face had gone the color of old concrete. Xu Tianzhu jumped down, crunching through snow, and came straight to me. Not just fixed, he said. More powerful than before. He apologized, asked for my phone number. No need, I said. Let us settle the repair cost. 1,000 wen. Zhang Mazi and his apprentice were already gone, slipping away while the crowd watched the Komatsu. The operators who had mocked me that morning crowded in. They asked about maintenance schedules, hydraulic problems, how to spot a gasket failure before it killed a machine. I answered every question, shared every tip. Knowledge hoarded is knowledge wasted, and a dozen operators who understood their own machines were worth more to me than a dozen who needed me to fix everything. In my first life, I would have puffed my chest and let them grovel. That man would have been forgotten by spring. That night, Duan Dahai asked how long the repair actually took. About 10 minutes, I said. His chopsticks stopped halfway to his mouth. 1,001, 10 minutes. More than most people earned in a month. I put a potato slice in my mouth and said nothing else. Outside, the Hitachi sat, half freed from its concrete tomb. The cement was almost gone. The hydraulics had not been touched. The engine was still buried. But now, I had a name that meant something in the excavator community, and a yard full of men who would remember the kid from the recycling station. The weeks after the Komatsu fix blurred together. Cement in the morning, scrap sorting in the afternoon, cooking for Duan at night. The Hitachi was nearly free now, orange steel emerging like a machine rising from its own grave. Brother Liang delivered the first load of parts, oil pipes, bucket gaskets, slewing center joint, 2 barrels of Hitachi spec engine oil. The boom pipes and travel motor parts would take a few more days. Every hydraulic hose on that excavator was shot. The previous owner had replaced them with cheap domestic lines, which was like putting paper bandages on a knife wound. I gritted my teeth and ordered imported originals. It hurt, but the machine deserved better than half measures, and so did the April deadline. One afternoon, while I was stacking parts in the small house for safekeeping, A gaunt figure appeared at the yard entrance. Military overcoat, dogskin hat, thin shoulders, hands behind his back. My father. "Dad, what brings you here?" He handed me a floral cloth bag, steamed buns, sugar triangles, a change of clothes. Then he said, almost offhandedly, that it was a shame my wife's father had not let her go to school, that she was wasted in the countryside. My father rarely praised anyone outside the family. The fact that he mentioned Han Jingfan, unprompted, told me something had shifted at home while I was gone. Duan Dahai greeted him warmly, called him Uncle Yu, said he had heard the old man was the real master craftsman. My father waved it off and thanked Duan for taking in his good-for-nothing son. Then, he walked straight to the plastic shed. He patted the Hitachi's frame, ran his hand along the boom housing, said imported excavators were really something, decades old and still this sturdy. He wondered when China would build machines that could trample these foreign beasts underfoot. There was weight in that sentence. His grandfather died defending a watchtower when the Japanese came. The family genealogy carried that scar. Yu Lao Nian hated Japanese machinery, but he was honest enough to admit they built things that lasted. "Dad, don't worry," I said. "With your son here, this day will come." He rolled his eyes, told me my face had gotten bigger. That afternoon, he watched me work. I could see his fingers twitching. The old man's hands remembered what his body had forgotten. So I fumbled a wrench, deliberately, used the connector wrong, took twice as long on a bolt that needed 3 seconds. He lasted about 10 minutes. Then, he grabbed the ratchet wrench from my hands and started disassembling the side panels with the kind of muscle memory that decades cannot erase. His fingers moved the way water moves. No thought, no hesitation, just flow. I stepped back and hid my smile. He had not come just to bring steamed buns. 2 years away from repair work had left an itch in his hands that no amount of farming could scratch. He needed to feel iron under his fingers again. My father never said this. He never would. But a son who pays attention can hear what his father's hands are saying. He stayed, not a day, not 2 days. He stayed until the hydraulic hoses were done. With both of us working, the job took 10 days instead of half a month. He never announced he was staying, never asked permission, just kept showing up at the plastic shed every morning, dogskin hat on, hands reaching for tools. During that stretch, 2 broken machines came into the yard. My father diagnosed the first by sound alone, tilting his head the way a musician listens for a wrong note. The second, he let me handle while he watched with his arms crossed, nodding once when I found the fault. Over 1,000 yuan from those 2 repairs. He said nothing about the transformation, nothing about how his reckless eldest son was now diagnosing imported excavators and earning real money. He just worked, side by side, iron under both our hands. One evening, he sat on the edge of the brick bed and quietly told me to buy New Year goods for Duan Dahai before heading home. We were burning his coal and taking up his space. A man repays that. In my first life, I never thought about debts like that. I took favors like they were owed to me. My father tried to teach me gratitude 100 times. I did not listen once. Now I listened. A week before New Year, I stopped in town for everything. Fruit, sunflower seeds, peanuts, candy for Zhao Feng, 2 large carp, ribbonfish, vegetables, gifts for Brother Liang, gifts for Duan. Then, my father and I rode the bus home. The village appeared through the window, snowdrifts against every fence, smoke from every chimney. 1992 was almost gone. New Year's Eve morning, I got up before anyone else and started cooking. Han Jingfan tried to help. I pushed her gently back onto the heated brick bed. Her belly was enormous now. The Yu family tradition was vegetarian food during worship. No pork, no beef, no lamb, no garlic, no green onions. Chicken and fish were permitted. I cleaned a carp, made celery noodles, peanuts, scrambled eggs, braised fish, chicken stewed with mushrooms. 6 dishes. My wife watched from the brick bed. She had been married to me for nearly 2 years and had no idea I could cook. In my other life, I learned out of loneliness. After everyone was gone, the new year came anyway. I stood in an empty kitchen year after year and cooked for the dead because there was no one left among the living. Those skills lived in my hands now. This time, the kitchen was full. As darkness fell, my father set up the ancestor worship. Floral apron, blanched vermicelli, fried tofu, everything arranged on the altar with precision. The family genealogy, the portraits, my grandmother's black and white photograph beside the table. I looked at that photograph and my nose went sour. If I had been reborn a few years earlier, I might have seen her one last time. What do we do next? I asked, rolling up my sleeves. My father stared at me. In every previous year, I had been lying on the brick bed, cracking melon seeds, while he did this alone. Now his eldest son stood beside him, sleeves rolled up, asking for instructions. He almost broke. I saw it. The faintest tremble at the corner of his mouth. The man who never cried, who faced down the entire village with 4 words on a frozen night, who carried 5 children's futures on thin shoulders without once asking for help. That man almost cried because his son offered to fry tofu. He swallowed it, told me to start frying. Are you sure you know how? His voice came out rough. This was food for the ancestors. Getting it wrong meant bad luck. The whole family gathered to watch. My mother, my sisters, Dasheng, Han Jingfan, heavy-bellied, standing next to my mother-in-law. I poured oil into the wok. Sliced tofu went in. I skimmed oil from the side and poured it over the pieces, turning them golden. Then fried fish, 2 crucian carp, until the skin crackled. My movements were faster than my father's, more precise. The muscle memory of a man who had done this alone for years, long after the man who taught him was gone. My mother walked over, untied the apron from my father's waist, and tied it around mine. Nobody spoke. The son had replaced the father at the stove, and the whole family understood what that meant. After cooking, my father took a candle lantern outside the village to burn yellow paper for the ancestors. When I was a child, I used to follow him and carry the lantern. I would look up at his face and see nothing. Now I knew what to look for. He was asking his own parents for strength, because the living never saw him ask for anything. He came back and stood before the altar, knelt, pressed his forehead to the floor. When he rose, his face was wet. My father was crying, not the way I cried, sudden and sharp. He cried the way old trees weep sap, slow, silent. From somewhere so deep, the tears seemed to come from a different lifetime. I had seen this once before, the year my grandmother died. He squatted in the corner of the woodpile and covered his chest with both hands and cried without making a sound. 5 children, a wife, a legacy built on land that had been taken and given back and taken again. He was asking the dead for strength. I knelt beside him, said nothing, just knelt. After worship, we made dumplings, tofu, egg, celery filling. The round mahogany table went up on the heated brick bed. My mother took on all 3 men in a drinking contest and won decisively. Firecrackers crackled outside. Xiao Feng demanded more. After the meal, my father put on his stern face and asked if the 3 eldest thought they were too grown up to greet their own parents. Dasheng panicked, shot me a look. You go first. I shot one back. The old man is drunk and unpredictable. You go. Then my wife stepped forward. Han Jingfan, who barely spoke, who held her silence like armor, walked to the center of the room and smiled. She told my father to calm down, that the 3 of us were not young anymore. She suggested we wish them both a happy new year together, say a few auspicious words, and hope for good fortune. Every person in that room stared. This was the woman whose books I sold, whose voice I never asked to hear. She stood in front of my entire family with her enormous belly and her quiet smile, and spoke with a grace none of us possessed. My father looked at her for a long time. Then he said softly, "Your wife's smile is beautiful." 6 words. From a man who measured words the way a jeweler measures gold. He was not complimenting her face. He was seeing her. For the first time, my father acknowledged that the woman his eldest son married was a person worth noticing. Han Jingfan blinked. Her hand drifted to her stomach, the way it always did when she did not know what to do with tenderness. Outside, the firecrackers died down. Snow fell in silence. 1992 ended the way it should have ended the first time, with a family sitting on a warm brick bed, watching candlelight flicker against the ancestor portraits. In my other life, this night was a war zone. My mother attacked my wife. My sisters took sides. My father did the ancestor worship alone, while the rest of us tore each other apart. I lay on the brick bed, cracking melon seeds, and did nothing. That version no longer existed. I had burned it down and built this one in its place. Not perfect, not loud, just warm. My father's tears, my wife's smile. Those were the only 2 things I kept from that night. Everything else faded, but those 2 I carried into every day that followed, like stones in my pocket I could reach for when the road got steep. Winter stayed longer than it should have. The days after New Year stretched thin and gray, the kind of cold that does not announce itself, but simply refuses to leave. My father walked to our house every morning to check on Dabai and stoke the fire, and every morning the village watched him go, confused. Yulao Nian, who had publicly disowned his eldest son's laziness for years, now crossing the yard before dawn to tend to that son's dog and that son's house. He never explained. Explaining was not something my father did. By mid-January, Dabai's mate had stopped eating properly. She lay on her side in the hay shelter behind our house, her belly swollen, her breathing shallow. Dabai circled the shelter, whimpering, pressing his nose against the gap in the boards, like he could will warmth through the wood. I knew what was coming. In my other life, I was in town when the puppies were born. Nobody prepared shelter. Nobody thought to. The mate delivered 4 pups in the open yard, during a night that dropped to -35. By morning, 3 were frozen stiff. The 4th lasted until noon. Dubai found them one by one, carried each to the hay shelter, and lay on top of them as if his body heat could undo what the cold had already done. When I came home 2 days later, he was still lying there. He did not move when I called. He did not eat for a week. The mate disappeared and never came back. That memory lived in my chest like a stone I could not swallow. This time, I cleaned out the abandoned house next to ours. The walls were crumbling earth. The roof sagged in the middle, but the heated brick bed still worked if you sealed the draft holes. I spent an afternoon stuffing straw into every crack, layering old quilts over the brick surface, banking the stove with coal from Duan Dahai's yard. My mother came by and asked what I was doing. Preparing for the puppies, I told her. She looked at me like I had lost my mind. A grown man insulating a house for a dog. Dubai has been with us 2 years, I said. He deserves better than a hay shelter. She said nothing, but an hour later, she came back with 2 old cotton blankets and a clay pot of warm rice water. She set them inside the door and left without a word. My mother's kindness always arrived on silent feet. The puppies came on a night so cold the windows cracked. 4 of them. Dubai's mate labored for hours, while Dubai paced outside the door, scratching at the wood. I sat inside with a kerosene lamp, watching, saying nothing. There was nothing to say. Birth does not require commentary. The smallest one came last, wet, shivering, no bigger than my fist. The mate licked it clean and nudged it toward her belly, but the pup could not find the teat. It mewled in a voice so thin it sounded like a question nobody was asking. I picked it up, cupped it in both hands. My palms were rough from months of sledgehammer work, cracked and calloused, and this thing in my hands weighed almost nothing. I held it against my chest, inside my coat, and felt its heartbeat through my shirt. Fast, fragile, desperate to keep going. After a minute, I set it down next to its mother. This time, it found the teat, latched on, began to nurse. Dubai pushed through the door and lay down beside the mat, his big white body curling around the entire family. He looked at me once, then closed his eyes. 4 puppies, all breathing, all warm. In my other life, I could not even save a dog's children. I was too busy, too careless, too convinced that small things did not matter. A litter of puppies. What was that? Against the weight of debts and ambition and a life falling apart? Everything. It was everything. Because the man who cannot be bothered to save what is small will never be trusted with what is large. My father taught me that without ever saying it. He walked to our house every morning to stoke a fire for a dog because that was what a man who kept his promises did. The promise was not spoken. The promise was, you are under my roof, and under my roof, nothing freezes. I sat in that crumbling house until the lamp burned low, watching 4 puppies nurse while their father slept beside them. The wind pushed against the straw-stuffed walls. The coal glowed orange in the stove. Nobody would tell stories about this night. Nobody would remember that Yu Dawei sat in an abandoned house at 2 in the morning, making sure a dog's children did not die. But Dubai would remember, and so would I. Spring came the way it always comes in the Northeast, not as warmth, but as mud. The snow did not melt so much as surrender, collapsing into brown slush that turned every road into a test of patience. By mid-March, the Hitachi was nearly complete. Oil filter replaced, boom and bucket gaskets seated. Brother Liang's last shipment of parts had arrived before the thaw, and every bolt was where it belonged. The cab was another matter. 3 windows missing, seat foam exposed, shock absorbers destroyed. Hu Wenkeng had visited the yard in his Jeep, inspected the machine, and told me to repaint it before the project started. Leaders would visit the construction site, he said. First impressions mattered, even for machines. So I painted it yellow because orange paint was unavailable and yellow was close enough. Duan Dahai helped me rig scaffolding from scrap pipe, and for 3 days, the yard smelled like primer and turpentine. The Hitachi went from a concrete tomb to a working excavator in less than 4 months. Every day, I test drove it in the open lot behind the station, running the boom through its full range, checking hydraulic pressure, listening for the whine that meant a seal was failing. The machine ran clean, smooth. The boom moved like it was grateful to be alive. On April 1st, Hu Wanqiang drove me to the project office. Section 9 of the North-South Expressway. Digging and hauling, 500 yuan a day. Diesel and oil provided. The contract was printed on a single sheet, 2 signatures, a red stamp. 15,000 won a month, settled monthly, starting in May. Construction began April 15th. The excavator had to be on site 3 days early. I signed my name and set the pen down. 15,000 yuan. In 1992, my father earned less than that in a year. The entire village earned less than that in a year. A cement-covered wreck I bought for 2,500 won with my wife's dowry money was now worth 500 a day. Hu Wangqiang clapped my shoulder and told me not to celebrate yet. The machine had to hold. The operator had to show up. The site had rules, and breaking them meant losing the contract. On the drive back, he asked if I had found my driver. I told him I had someone in mind. He did not press. My second uncle understood that some decisions needed to sit before they were spoken. That night, I sat alone in the small house at Duandahai Station. The contract lay on the table next to a half-eaten bowl of rice. The stove I had built from an oil drum crackled in the corner. Outside, the Hitachi stood in the dark, freshly painted, windows installed, ready for a job that would not start for 2 weeks. 15,000 won a month. Enough for a brick house. Enough for my son's first year. Enough to start putting money aside for the thing I could not say out loud yet. A hospital in the city. A surgeon who could open my sister's skull and remove the thing killing her before she ever knew it was there. Yufeng's headaches had not stopped. Every time I went home, she pressed her fingers to her temple with that small circular motion, smiled, and waved it off. Just a headache. Comes and goes. She was 18 years old and planning to leave for work at our aunt's house after spring planting. In my other life, she left, married, got pregnant, and died before 30. The tumor was small, operable. A good surgeon could have saved her with a success rate that would make you furious it was never caught. Nobody had the money. That was the entire explanation. Not ignorance, not cruelty. Poverty. The kind that kills not through violence, but through absence. The absence of options. The absence of a car to drive to the city. The absence of 15,000 won a month. Now, I had the money. Or I would, starting in May. The question was whether I had the time. Then, there was Yao Jinfu. My mind kept circling back to him, the way it circled back to Yufeng's temple, involuntarily, with the weight of knowledge I could not share. Yao Jinfu, third child of teacher Yao from Xinglong village, my follower from elementary school through junior high, the kid who scored 9th in his class just so he could attend the same school as me, whose father spent 200 won on a bicycle that I ended up riding more than he did. He went to technical school, learned to operate excavators, got hired by a boss in Hohhot who was running an illegal mine. The boss got 7 years. Yao Jinfu, the driver, got 3. He should be back by now. Released into a village that called him a murderer behind his back and kept its distance to his face. In my other life, my father warned me away from him. Gossip is a fearsome thing, the old man said. Do not drag the family down. So I stayed away. Years later, I heard that Yao Jinfu took a pig slaughtering knife to his own chest one morning because the silence of an entire village is heavier than a prison sentence. That night, I dreamed of him, a man who looked like the boy I remembered, older, thinner, saying goodbye through tears. I needed an operator, someone I could trust completely, someone who would treat the Hitachi like it was his own life, someone who would not drive it into a cement pit out of spite. Yao Jinfu had trained on excavators. He was strong, loyal, and desperate for any reason to keep living, and I owed him, not for anything he had done, but for what I failed to do. Walking away from a man when the village walks away is easy. Walking toward him is the only thing that counts. The contract sat on the table. Yufeng's headaches ticked behind my eyes. Yao Jinfu's silence echoed from a village I had not visited in years. 15,000 won a month was not a victory. It was a starting line. The people I needed to save were still out there, still hurting, still waiting for someone to show up. The puppies had survived because I insulated one room and stayed awake through one night. My sister would need more than straw and coal. My friend would need more than a job, but it started the same way, with someone deciding that the small thing mattered, that the cold would not win, that showing up was not optional. Tomorrow, I would drive home, check on Han Jingfan, feel my son kick through her belly, and listen to my father pretend he was not proud of me. Then, I would take the road east to Xinglong village and knock on the door of the man everyone else had forgotten. I knew exactly who to call. The question was whether he would answer. The road to Xinglongtun was not a road. It was a trail worn into the earth by school children and farmers, one footstep at a time, over decades. Narrow enough that an adult had to walk with his arms close to his body. The spring mud sucked at my boots, like it was trying to keep me from going. Good, let it try. 40 minutes of walking, through uneven furrows from last year's planting, past the ruins of the old Heshan primary school fence. Every summer when the corn grew tall, a captain would lead a line of children single file through stalks taller than their heads. Yao Jinfu and I walked that line together together for 6 years. He was always behind me, not because he was slow, because he chose to be. Third child of teacher Yao, the kid who scored 9th in his class just so he could attend the same school as me, whose father spent 200 yuan on a bicycle that I rode more than Jinfu ever did, who followed me everywhere and split whatever he had without being asked. In my other life, he went to technical school, learned to operate excavators, got hired by a boss running an illegal mine near Hohhot. The boss got 7 years. Jinfu got 3, not for murder, for being loyal to the wrong man, but the village did not care about the details. They heard prison. They filled in the rest with their own poison. My father warned me away. Gossip is a fearsome thing, the old man said. Do not drag the family down, so I stayed away. I crossed the street when I saw him. Then, I heard he took a pig slaughtering knife to his own chest one morning, because the silence of an entire village is heavier than a prison sentence. That memory lived in my chest like a blade I could not pull out. The supply and marketing cooperative appeared through the last stretch of open field, its whitewashed walls crumbling, weeds climbing the foundation. Ma Ziliang was behind the counter, old classmate, sat side by side in elementary school. He told me Jinfu was back, told me people said it was murder, said the whole village was keeping its distance. Then he leaned forward and said he just wanted to let me know. Whether I went or not was up to me. I bought apples and oranges, paid, walked out. Teacher Yao's old courtyard sat at the western edge of the village, less than an acre, small garden. The gate was old wooden planks with a red rope tied to the post. His wife had died years ago. The old man had moved across the street. The courtyard had been idle ever since. A man was bent over in the garden, hoeing out last year's corn stalks. Dark complexion, full beard. He worked with his head down, the way a man works when he has stopped expecting anyone to show up. I placed my hands on the fence and waited. He finished one furrow, straightened up, looked at me. He threw down the hoe, ran to the south side of the garden, and jumped the fence. Brother, what brings you here? That grin, teeth showing, eyes bright. 3 years of prison had not killed it. 3 months of village silence had not killed it either. It was just waiting for someone to aim it at. What? So I can't come? I pushed the fruit into his arms. He glanced at the neighbors, peering out from behind their gates. The watching had already started. You'd away from Yujiatun, standing in the murderer's yard in broad daylight. Let them know. In my other life, I abandoned this man. Not because I believed the rumors, because I was afraid of what people would think if I stood next to him. The village walked away, so I walked away. I told myself it was practical. Then he died, and I carried that cowardice for the rest of my life. This time, I walked 40 minutes on a dirt trail to stand on the other side of his fence. That was the whole act, not a speech, not a rescue, just showing up. Sometimes showing up is the hardest thing a person can do. He cooked his mother's recipes, stir-fried dried tofu with scallions, hot and sour shredded potatoes, egg sauce. We drank sorghum liquor from porcelain bowls on the old 8 Immortals table while the candle flickered between us. He talked about the mine, the arrest, the 3 years, how he saved every one and sent it home, how his own brother treated him like a stranger when he came back, how the children threw dirt and made up songs. When he mentioned his mother, the crack in his voice became a break. He stopped talking and cried into his bowl. I drank in silence. My grip on the porcelain went white. After midnight, I told him, I have an excavator, Hitachi UH-03, contract on the North-South Expressway, Section 9. I need an operator, $2,000 a month, plus a year-end bonus. You interested? He looked at his shoes, worn black cotton, the same posture as when a teacher scolded him in grade school. Brother, people talk. If they find out you hired me, it'll cause you trouble. Let me worry about my trouble. But Jinfu, you trained on excavators for years. You are strong, you work hard, and you will not drive my machine into a cement pit out of spite. That is what I need. The rest is noise. He sat on the edge of the heated brick bed, staring at his hands, the way a man stares at tools he thought he would never use again. Then he nodded, once, small, like a door opening that had been locked for a very long time. The next morning, I drove back to Xinglongtun and picked him up. His second sister-in-law had packed a bundle, quilt, clothes, towel, iron cup, a new wash basin she bought with her own money. She stood in the doorway and told him to eat well and not cause his brother trouble. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. At the station, the Hitachi sat freshly painted, waiting. Get in, I said. He climbed into the cab. His hands found the controls. For a moment, he just sat there, palms flat against the levers, eyes closed, a man remembering who he used to be. Then he started the engine, stalled it. The boom lurched. The engine died with a metallic cough. He looked at me through the cab window like a boy who had dropped his father's best tool. Again, I said. He stalled it twice more. The third time, the engine caught and held. The boom rose, shaky, uncertain. By afternoon, the lurching became movement. By the second day, the movement became work. When he loaded the Hitachi onto the tow truck trailer, his hands were shaking, but his face had changed. Something behind his eyes had come back on. A lamp in a room that had been dark for years. At the Section 9 dormitory, I set his package on the lower bunk. Prefab walls, 10 square meters, 8 beds. Not much, but it was a place with his name attached to it. For a man who had been living in a dead teacher's house with newspaper walls, that was everything. Stick with me, I said. You will have your day. Construction started without ceremony. The first days, the old Hitachi moved slowly. Jinfu was careful, treating the machine like glass. But as the parts settled and the hydraulics smoothed out, his confidence built. The boom swung wider, the bucket bit deeper. Operators in adjacent sections had heard the word murderer. They looked at Jinfu and then at me, and whatever they saw in my face made them look away. My reputation was a wall around him. The Komatsu fix, the railway contract, Hu Wangqiang's name behind mine. Nobody was going to harass the man working beside me. Jinfu did not know this. He thought they left him alone because they were busy. That was fine. Some silences are purchased, not given. People think patience is about waiting. It is not. Patience is about not giving up on someone before they have had a chance to become who they could be. My father taught me that by staying at the station until the hydraulic hoses were done, by showing up every morning with his dogskin hat and his thin hands reaching for tools. He was patient with me. Now I was patient with Jinfu. Walking towards someone will not fix everything. Jinfu still flinched when strangers spoke too loudly, still drank alone some nights with the lights off. 3 years of prison and a village's silence do not vanish because someone offers you a job, but the job was a floor, and a man with a floor under his feet can start to stand. That was enough. For now, that was enough. The call came on April 16th, not a phone call. A neighbor's kid, sprinting down the construction site access road on bare feet, shouting my name before he even reached the gate. Han Jingfan was in labor. Jinfu was already climbing down from the cab. He told me to go. He would handle the site. Supervisor Chung had granted leave days earlier after I fixed Huang Fengchang's Audi on the roadside, and the boss's boss told me to take care of my wife and children. Go, Jinfu said. Your son is waiting. The four-wheeled truck ate the road between Section 9 and Yujiatun in under an hour. Every pothole rattled my teeth. Every blackbird on the fence wire looked like it was watching me race past something I had already lost once. In my other life, I was not here. I was in the oil city, chasing debts, chasing the wrong version of a future that never arrived. My mother-in-law found the midwife. My parents handled everything. My wife delivered our firstborn, surrounded by people who loved her, and none of them were me. That absence was a hole I carried in my ribs for decades. This time, I had arranged the midwife the day before, the best in 3 villages. She thought I was ridiculous. She came anyway. When I pulled into the courtyard, my father was pacing. Cotton coat, dogskin hat, hands clasped behind his back. He snapped at me to stop circling. Then, he turned around and started pacing again. My mother and Han Jingfan's mother were inside. The door was shut. The curtain was drawn. From the yard, I could hear nothing. Then, everything. A cry. Thin, high. The sound a voice makes when it has never been used before. My father stopped pacing. His wrinkled face cracked open into a smile so wide it looked like it hurt. The man who had carried 5 children's futures on thin shoulders without once asking for help stood in his own courtyard and trembled. The midwife let us in. My mother placed the boy in my arms. 7.5 Jin, pink, furious, eyes squeezed shut, fists clenched, already fighting the world, and he was 10 minutes old. I had held this child before, in another lifetime, when he was older, when the damage was already done. When his eyes looked at me, the way children look at a stranger who happens to live in their house. Now he weighed almost nothing. His fingers curled around my thumb. Not because he knew me, because that is what newborns do. They reach for whatever is closest. This time, the closest thing was his father. My nose went sour, my vision blurred. I pressed my lips together and said nothing because the words I wanted to say did not exist in any language I knew. Something between I am sorry and I am here, and I will not waste this. My father cut off the naming with a wave. Let me do a divination for my grandson first. He was already jogging toward the backyard, moving faster than I had seen him move in years. He came back breathless. The boy was lacking water in his 5 elements. In our generation, the character Mu was unlucky. The name would be Yu Muyu, the exact same name, the exact same divination. Some things do not change between lifetimes. My son was always meant to be Yu Muyu. He was just meant to have a father who showed up. Han Jingfan lay on the bed, pale, exhausted, her hair stuck to her forehead with sweat. She watched me hold the boy, and something in her face shifted. The corners of her mouth lifted, and for the first time since the night I gave her journey to the west, she smiled without guarding it. No caution, no waiting for the kindness to be taken back. That smile. I spent a lifetime chasing contracts and debts and the wrong kind of respect. None of it was worth what I was looking at right now. Yumuyu, I said, looking down at the sleeping face. No matter what comes, your father will be here. Her hand found the edge of the blanket and pulled it tighter around the boy. She did not say anything. She did not need to. The first month passed the way first months do with a newborn, sleepless, milk-stained, loud at 3 in the morning, and silent at noon. My mother-in-law stayed to help, cooking recovery soups thick with egg and ginger. When I was home, I held the boy. When I was at the site, Jinfu covered everything. The old Hitachi ran clean, and Jinfu ran it like it was his own life. The first payment arrived in mid-May, 15,000 yuan, more than my father earned in a year. At the bank, I deposited 2,000 into Jinfu's passbook, paid 5,000 toward Brother Liang's parts debt. He saw the money and grinned like a child. Then, I drove to the market. Liu Town's big market stretched down both sides of the road. Grilled sausages at 50 cents each, chicken cutlets, ice water in colored bags, children pressed against the stall fronts, noses aimed at the frying oil, watching with the kind of hunger that is not just about food. I bought some of everything, new clothes for every person in my family, a thin round-necked blouse for my mother-in-law, chicken wing wood chopsticks because the old ones had warped past use. At the town middle school, I found Xiao Fang and handed her 2 plastic bags of snacks. She whispered that she would hide them in the dormitory, so only 6 girls would share. Then, she hummed a song and walked away. My mother scolded me for spending too much. My father said 4 words, "Watch your mouth, village," meaning, do not act like you are someone special just because you have made a little money. Then, he left quickly, the way he always left, when he was in danger of feeling something. The house repair started the following week. Not a new house, a repair. In 1993, a new brick house would attract the kind of envy that turns neighbors into enemies. My father's philosophy in architecture: fix what is broken before you build what is new. The West Wing had been collapsing for 2 years. I hired men from the village, brick foundation, mud walls, adobe bricks dried in the yard, tore out the old kang and built a new one with an S-shaped fire hole. My wife and I picked the mat together at the supply and marketing cooperative. Purple patterned. She said it was beautiful. A large mirror went on the wall. New double opening windows with hooks for summer. 2,800 yuan for everything, including worker meals. With the leftover bricks, I tore down Dubai's old hay shelter and built a proper doghouse. Brick walls, fresh straw, room for 5 dogs. The runt of the litter climbed on top and surveyed the yard like a general. None of it was expensive. All of it was specific. Every nail, every brick, every hook on the window was a decision, not a victory lap. Just a man putting his house in order the way his father had always done, quietly, without announcement. When it was done, I gave Han Jingfan 2,000 yuan, the exact amount of her dowry I had used to buy the Hitachi, returned, every fen. She took it without counting and started talking about hatching chicks. She would give some to my mother after they hatched, she said. My mother was smiling all day now. Before Yu Feng left for Hohhot, I pressed 500 yuan into her hand. She tried to refuse. I closed her fingers around it. If things get hard out there, this gives you options. Her right hand drifted to her temple. That small circular pressure, just a headache, comes and goes. My father and I drove her to the train station. The ride back was silent. He knew about her headaches the way he knew about everything. Quietly, without solutions. 15,000 a month, after salary, debts, gifts, renovation, and my sister's money. I had just over 1,000 yuan left. Still poor, but the collapsing house was a home now. My son slept on a purple mat in a room with windows that opened. My wife was reading books and raising chicks and smiling without guarding it. Villagers walked past the yard during the renovation. They did not speak. The same house that had been a punchline was now a home with clean windows and dogs sleeping in a brick kennel. Silence was the loudest compliment a village could give. Somewhere in the back of my mind, behind every brick I laid, a number was growing. The number I needed to take Yu Feng to a hospital in the city and find a surgeon who could look inside her head. That number was not close yet, but it was closer than yesterday. And yesterday was closer than the day I sat in a woodpile with a rifle across my lap. And nothing to my name but a second chance. 1 brick at a time. That was all I knew how to do. Summer arrived the way money arrives in a poor man's life. Slowly, then all at once. By June, the garden was green, the chives were ready, and the mornings smelled like dumplings and warm earth. Han Jingfan and my mother had the kitchen running before dawn, and I ate like a man who had earned the right to be fed. Section 9 was humming. Jinfu had the Hitachi moving like an extension of his own body, and the new contracts Supervisor Chang had pushed through meant everyone on site was working harder than before. The slackers had been replaced. That morning, I drove out to check on the machine. My son was 3 months old. Han Jingfan needed me close, but the Hitachi was my livelihood, and a man who ignores his livelihood loses the right to provide. Supervisor Chang spotted me before I reached the 9th section. White hard hat, clipboard, that permanent half squint from years of reading engineering maps in bad light. He grabbed my arm before I could open my mouth. The big boss wanted to see me. Huang Fengchang, general manager of the Oil City branch, the man above Ho Wangqiang, above Supervisor Chang, above everyone whose name I had learned since April. Now, not tomorrow, not after lunch. Your boss started asking for you the day before yesterday, he said, and something in his voice sat between amusement and warning. I reckon you're in for a rough time once you get there. My stomach dropped. The only connection I had to Huang Fengchang was the Audi. Weeks earlier, I had been driving the shortcut home when I saw the black sedan pulled over on the shoulder with its hood up, steam rising. 2 men standing beside it, one in a suit, one in work clothes, both looking at the engine the way city people look at engines, as if staring hard enough might fix it. The suit was Huang Fengchang. I did not know that yet. All I saw was an overheating engine and 2 men who could not find the problem. Mind if I take a look? I said, already walking toward the hood. The man in work clothes, Supervisor Chang, though I did not know his name either, stepped aside with a skepticism I could feel on my skin. The suited man said nothing, just watched. An engine is an engine. Excavator, tractor, Audi. The principles do not change. Blocked thermostat, 15 minutes, 1 wrench, and the kind of diagnostic instinct you cannot teach in a classroom. His own mechanics had probably been chasing electrical faults for days. They were looking in the wrong place because they had been trained to look in expensive places first. I cleared the blockage, checked the coolant, and told the driver to let it idle. The engine settled into a clean hum. No steam, no rattle. The temperature gauge dropped like a held breath releasing. Huang Fengchang studied me the way my father studied a piece of iron. He asked my name, where I worked. When I mentioned Section 9 and the Hitachi, something clicked behind his eyes. The kid from the recycling station, the Komatsu fix. Hao Wangqiang's nephew. In my first life, I never met this man at the right time. I was always too broke, too angry, too proud to be in the room where things happened. By the time his name crossed my path, I was a middle-aged nobody fixing trucks in a rented yard. This time, I fixed his car on a dirt road, and he saw what I could do. He gave me his office phone number and told me to take care of my wife and child. That was weeks ago. Now Supervisor Chang was telling me to go, immediately, to the Oil City. A man from the 8th Bureau drove me in a black Volkswagen, Bai Zhongsheng, fair-skinned, southern accent, younger looking than his years. Curious about the northern countryside, the way city boys always are, all romance and no frostbite. The Oil City branch sat in a square building on Golden Street, 7 stories of gray concrete with a single black gate. Bai Zhongsheng led me upstairs. The sign on the 3rd floor door said General Manager. Huang Fengchang was behind his desk, glasses on, pen in hand. When he looked up and saw me, the pen came down and something close to a smile appeared. Sit, it's about Manzi, Huang Man, his younger cousin. His mother wanted the boy to learn a trade, not for money, because she was afraid that if something happened to her, a boy without skills would lose everything. Huang Fengchang spoke about it quietly, the way powerful men speak about family, without performance, without leverage. I told him Jinfu could train Huang Man on the Hitachi, 2 years as an apprentice, then market rate. That part was settled. Then his expression changed. He pulled a document from the drawer and slid it across the desk. A photograph, an excavator with a black boom, yellow body, orange warning strip along the bottom, tracks rusted brown, boom and arms hanging limp as if the machine had given up. Cracked hydraulic hoses visible even in the photo. Black veins split open and dried. Can you repair an imported Volvo excavator? Ackerman 11. Volvo's heavy-duty line, acquired a few years back. 18 tons minimum. Bucket capacity over a cubic meter. In my other life, I repaired a later model from the same family. The main pump had problems then too. Repairing it is no problem, I said, and I meant it. But my voice came out careful because the look on Huang Fengchang's face told me the machine was not the only thing broken here. He leaned forward. The smile vanished. There is a technician from headquarters repairing the other Volvo at the equipment site. Be careful. That was not advice about machinery. That was a warning about people. Over lunch in the supervisor's canteen, fried chicken, braised pork, ribbon fish, food I had not seen outside of New Year. I met the man behind the warning, Manager Wu Qi, portly, confident, the kind of smile that arrives before the knife. He sat down uninvited and started asking questions he already knew the answers to. When he called me Brother Dewey and offered to escort me to the factory, every instinct from my first life fired at once. Huang Fengchang watched without blinking. After Wu Qi left, he pushed a fried chicken leg onto my plate. Where I was going, he said, there would be no chicken legs. That afternoon, Bai Zhongsheng drove me to the equipment factory, a detached courtyard in Ranghulu district, two-story building on the south side, a row of warehouses, faded parking lines on the concrete, bleached by years of weather. Two excavators sat in the yard. One had men swarming over it. Team 1, Master Lu's machine. The other Ackerman 11 sat in the far corner, surrounded by dry grass growing up around the tracks, like the earth was trying to reclaim it. That was mine. Up close, it was worse than the photograph. The walking motor had been tampered with. Tracks showed disassembly marks. Someone had started this repair and walked away. I climbed onto the roof, removed the exhaust pipe, ran my fingers along the inside. Thick, sticky residue. Engine oil, where engine oil should never be. Burning oil, bad, but fixable. The pilot pump was the real problem. Every screw joint rusted shut. Two bolt heads sheared off by whoever came before me. Shafts frozen inside the housing. Removing those broken screws without destroying the pump casing would take techniques most mechanics in 1993 had never seen. The machine was bad. The politics around the machine were worse. Master Lu watched me from across the yard. He was sitting in the cab of his own Ackerman, thermos in hand, narrating his 30 years of experience to his crew while stealing glances at my diagnostic work. When our eyes met, he nodded and smiled. Polite, professional, the kind of smile that measures you for a coffin. He walked over later, thermos still in hand, and told me the car was difficult. 20 or 30 years of experience required, he said. His own Ackerman was nearly finished. Gearbox, swing motor, engine, track rollers, all fixed. He said it casually, the way a boxer mentions his record before the bell rings. Then, he wished me good luck and walked away. Behind him, Manager Wu appeared at the edge of the yard, exchanged words with Master Lu that I could not hear, and left. Bai Zhongsheng showed me to room 302 on the second floor. Clean bed, white bedding, a desk wiped to a shine. Master Lu's room was next door. The man I had been warned about would be sleeping through the same wall. That night, I lay on the clean white bed and stared at the ceiling. My son was 3 months old in a village 2 hours away. My wife was reading by candlelight. My sister's hand was drifting to her temple in that small circular pressure that meant the clock was still ticking. And here I was. In a factory yard with a paralyzed Volvo, a rival who had already failed and did not want me to succeed, a headquarters manager whose smile hid something I could not name, and a big boss who had warned me to be careful without telling me what to be careful of. In my first life, I would have stormed in, fixed the machine in a fury, cursed anyone who looked at me wrong, and burned every bridge on the way out. That man earned his enemies the way other men earned wages, reliably, daily, without thinking. This time, I closed my eyes and listened. The machine could wait until morning. The politics could wait until I understood the board. Patience was not weakness. Patience was the sharpest tool in my box, and I had spent a lifetime learning how to use it. Tomorrow, I would start on the engine, and I would watch everything. The machine was fixable. Whether I survived the people around it was a different question entirely. The morning after my first night at the factory, I climbed onto the Ackerman before the sun cleared the warehouse roof and started where the last mechanic had given up. The engine was the priority. Burning oil meant cracked rings or a scored cylinder wall. I pulled the exhaust pipe, ran my finger along the bore, and felt the scoring. Deep grooves, 3 cylinders out of 6. The camshaft was warped. The crankshaft oil seals had split wide open. Every part of that engine was a record of neglect, driven the way a man drives a borrowed car, hard, fast, and without guilt. The second team gathered without being called. 5 men, quiet, competent. They started on the valve assembly, while I worked the crane setup for the main pump. That pump was the real battle. Every screw joint rusted shut. 2 bolt heads sheared off by whoever came before me. Removing broken screws without destroying the pump casing required a technique I had learned in another lifetime, in a repair yard that did not exist yet. Bai Zhongsheng brought a welding machine, came back without welding rods, came back a second time with everything. The man was brilliant with tea and paperwork. Hardware was not his language. The yard went quiet when I clamped the welding rod and knelt in front of the pump. Master Lu watched from the cab of his own Ackerman, thermos in hand, not blinking. What I did was simple if you had spent decades doing it. I welded a T-shaped socket wrench directly onto the cross-section of the broken screw, 3 tack points, then a full bead around the joint. When the weld cooled, I slipped a length of pipe over the wrench handle for leverage and turned. The screw moved, a low metallic groan, then rotation, smooth, clean. The squad leader shook his head, the way men shake their heads when they realize the person in front of them is operating on a level they had not known existed. Master Lu said nothing. His thermos stayed in his hand, but he was not drinking. Over the next 4 days, the engine came apart and went back together. Camshaft, crankshaft seals, cylinder liners, pistons, fuel injectors. The second team cleaned every part with gasoline until the metal shone. I showed them the correct disassembly sequence for imported engines, step by step, because knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied. While we worked, small things started going wrong. A wrench vanished overnight. A box of new gaskets from headquarters arrived with the seal opened and 2 swapped for worn ones. One morning, the valve cover I had installed sat at a different angle, shifted, as if someone had removed it in the dark and replaced it without tightening all the screws. The squad leader pulled me aside. Something was not right. Shadows near the machines after midnight. I told him to let it go. The old me would have stormed into Master Lu's room and kicked the door open. That man lived on rage the way other men lived on rice. He won some fights and lost his entire life. This time, I said nothing. Adjusted the valve cover, replaced the missing wrench, checked every gasket, continued working. Master Lu watched from across the yard. His smile never changed. Dangerous in the way patient men are dangerous. Not because they act, but because they wait for you to stop paying attention. 2 could play that game. The Ackerman was nearly finished, and every day it got closer, the sabotage got bolder. Parts loosened overnight. A diesel filter found behind the warehouse, tossed in the weeds. Master Lu's crew laughed louder at meals, and still I said nothing. Because in 1993, an accusation without evidence was a bullet without a gun. My word against a 30-year veteran backed by Manager Wu from headquarters. The man who shouted loudest lost. The man who proved his case won. What I needed was proof. After dinner on the 7th day, I went to Bai Zhongsheng's office. "I need to borrow your camera," I said. "The Canon." He set his teacup down. "What for?" "Night photography." The questions stacked behind his eyes, but he did not ask them. He brought the Canon EOS 5 from his dormitory, still in its leather case, brand new, eye-tracking autofocus, the most advanced consumer camera in China. He had not even used it himself. "You hold it upside down," he said, watching me aim at the wall. That afternoon, he taught me everything. How to kill the flash, how to widen the aperture for low light, how to shoot upward from low angles so a face caught the moonlight, how to brace the body against something solid, because at slow shutter speeds, the smallest tremor turned a photograph into a smear. By evening, I could operate the camera in the dark by touch alone, past midnight. The factory yard was blue and silver, under a 3/4 moon. The 2 Ackermans sat like sleeping animals, their booms silhouetted against the sky. Wind pushed through the dry grass along the fence, a soft rushing sound that covered everything smaller than a shout. I lay flat under the chassis of Master Lu's own Ackerman, the camera against my chest, sightline clear to my machine 30 meters away. At 12:40, a door opened on the 2nd floor, footsteps on the stairs, slow, careful, the kind of careful that comes from practice, not nerves. He crossed the yard in shadow, climbed onto my Ackerman without a flashlight, and began removing screws by feel. The shutter clicked, once, twice, 3 times. The wind covered the sound. He worked for 20 minutes, removed the valve cover, loosened connecting bolts, replaced a new gasket with a worn one from his pocket, then reassembled everything with only half the screws, leaving it looking intact to anyone who did not know what to look for. 14 photographs, his face in moonlight, his hands on my engine, every frame sharp enough to read the brand stamp on the tool. He climbed down. I did not move. He did not go back to his room. Instead, he walked to the warehouse side door, knocked twice. 2 figures from the first team stepped out, carrying parts I recognized. A distributor, hydraulic valves, imported plungers still in factory packaging, new parts. The parts headquarters had sent for my repair. They loaded everything onto a handcart and pushed through the back gate, across the wasteland, toward the national highway. My heart was hammering, not from fear, from recognition. In my other life, I ran a repair company. I knew what inventory theft looked like. Order more parts than you need. Sign the requisition. Divert the surplus. The maintenance captain's signature was on every form. His father, the old cook, had tried to quit that morning. The old man knew. He could not stop his son, so he tried to leave before the roof caved in. I followed at distance through the grass. The scrap recycling station sat near the highway, chain link fence around a dirt lot. Master Lu walked in like a regular customer. Money changed hands, folded bills. The first team members loaded parts onto a pickup truck, engine components, distributor plates, imported fittings worth more than most men earned in 6 months. From behind a stack of corrugated sheeting, I photographed everything: the handshake, the money, the truck, the license plate, the faces. 23 more photographs, 37 total. The old me would have stepped out and beaten Master Lu until his thermos shattered, would have felt righteous, would have had bruised knuckles and zero evidence. Instead, I pressed the shutter one more time and walked back to the factory in the dark. The next morning, Bai Zhongsheng drove me to the largest photo studio in the oil city. He paid for the developing without being asked, because by the time I told him what was on that film, his face had gone the color of old concrete. Back at the factory, I spread 37 prints across his desk, a story told in silver gelatin: sabotage, theft, a supply chain running from the parts requisition through the captain's signature to a scrap dealer on the highway. "You should see these," I said. Bai Zhongsheng looked at every photograph. When he finally raised his head, the easygoing tea-drinking southerner was gone. The factory director was sitting there instead. The investigation started that afternoon. I was not part of it. That was not my job. While Bai Zhongsheng made phone calls, I went back to the yard and finished the Volvo. The last bolt went in at sunset. I climbed into the cab, turned the key, and the engine caught on the first try. The Ackerman shuddered once, a deep tremor that traveled through the seat, through my boots, into the concrete. Then the boom rose, smooth, strong. The bucket swung against the orange sky and held steady. The second team stood watching. The squad leader crossed his arms and nodded once. No words, no applause, just that nod, which was worth more than either. That evening, I packed my tools. The military green toolbox, over 100 jin, every wrench in its place. Bai Zhongsheng walked me to the gate with 2 bags of his mother's aged white tea, pressed them into my hands. "Go home to your family," he said. The drive took 2 hours. Dirt and gravel, bumpy enough to rattle teeth, but the sky was that deep northeast blue that only appears after weeks of summer heat. Warm air through the windows, wheat fields golden on both sides. Halfway home, I pulled over and sat on the hood. Yufeng's headaches had not stopped. She was in Hohhot now, working at our aunt's house, pressing her fingers to her temple and waving it off the way she always did. The tumor was still small, still operable, and for the first time in either of my lives, I had the resources to do something about it. The Hitachi income, Huang Fengchang's network, city hospitals, a phone call I would make tomorrow, and another the day after, until I found the surgeon who could save her. The clock was still ticking, but there was light on the dial now, and I could read the time. Yujiatun appeared through the windshield the way it always appeared: low rooftops, chimney smoke, dogs behind fences. My courtyard gate was closed. The brick doghouse sat in the yard, and Dabai was lying across the threshold like a white stone, head on his paws. He stood when he heard the engine. His tail started before his body did. Candle glow leaked through the window, a single flame, steady, not flickering. Han Jingfan was sitting on the edge of the heated brick bed with a book open in her lap. Her right hand held the page. Her left hand rested on the blanket beside our sleeping son. She looked up when the door opened. 6 months ago, I had hidden in a woodpile in 30 below darkness with a rifle across my lap, aiming at my own granary, a man with nothing but rage and a second chance. Now, I stood in the doorway of a house I had repaired with money I had earned, looking at a woman who had always been smarter than me and a son who would never know the father I almost was. The candle flame bent toward the open door. Han Jingfan closed the book with her finger holding the page and said nothing. She did not need to. Dabai pressed against my legs, the same warmth, the same weight, the same silent loyalty that had kept me alive on the coldest night of my life. I set the toolbox down, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. My son's breathing was soft and even. My wife's book was Dream of the Red Chamber, pages yellowed, spine cracked from use. She had bought it from a truck driver for less than a meal. The woman I once called a rural girl who knew nothing was reading one of the greatest novels ever written by candlelight, while our son slept beside her, while the dogs slept in the yard, while somewhere in the oil city a man with a thermos was learning that patience is sharper than any wrench. Not finished, not perfect, just whole. And for now, whole was enough.